Alright, welcome back everybody to episode 5, Effective Ingot Use and Priority. We'll be looking at how to spend January ingots today. As for the objectives, we need to discuss what is effective versus minimum ingot use, what's the difference between the two, how many ingots to invest for each unit as usual, are they DPS characters? Likely they'll need 3 out of 3 ingots. If they're support or niche characters, potentially less ingots there. And what is ingot priority in January? I'll be doing something different this time. I'll be doing a role breakdown, and we'll be doing a table once we get up to that point. So what is effective versus minimum ingots? For effective ingots, this is the point at which a unit peaks or excels in their given role. For minimum ingots, this is the lowest investment point required for a unit to do their role. An example of an effective ingot use would be Ultimecia at 3 out of 3. DPS characters, they generally want to be maxed out. She gains a free ability use that helps with output and longevity. On the flip side, for minimum ingots, support characters can generally be left at lower breaks, Warrior of Light at 0 out of 3, and Lily set at 1 out of 3 for instance. If you give them more ingots, they will not really enhance their supporting role. Supports, however, can also require max ingots as well. Use Cholo, for example, at max break, she gets a free turn, she gets faster cast rate, she gets a last stand passive, so for her, effective use would be maxing her out. For minimum ingots, be sure to evaluate each unit individually. For this presentation, we'll be looking mostly for effective ingot usage. So here's the generated roster for part 1. The units in the green aura are the ones receiving reworks coming up. The cast is pretty strong. Here's the roster for part 2. There's lots of supports here, much more so than DPS characters. So how many ingots to invest for each unit? So let's start off with Kate Sith. Kate Sith is a melee support unit. He gives buffs, he does healing, and he batteries the party. His new EX weapon is an AoE Brave plus HP attack, and the most notable thing here is it grants a unique buff to him as an aura, so the party gets Brave regen and it buffs their initial bravery. For his EX Plus, I would recommend 2 out of 3 for him because the recast speed is increased, so that's going to be very important for longevity. For the minimum ingot recommendation, I would also say the same thing, 2 out of 3, because Kate Sith EX weapon is very RNG based, so raising the potency may not do much for him. And you can see here the recast speed is the most important thing to consider. Next unit we have is Balthier. Balthier is a Dispeller, he also does range DPS. His new EX weapon is an AoE Brave plus HP attack, 100% damage on all enemies. It gives him a unique buff that lowers all enemies' stats, so that's the unique feature that he has. For EX Plus for him, I would definitely recommend 3 out of 3 because his role is a damage dealer. If you wanted to go for the minimum route, 2 out of 3 for him because he gets the unique buff starting up at the beginning of the waves, so that's going to help him out. Next unit we have is Barret. Barret is a ranged DPS unit. He carries a pretty big attack and max brave aura. His new EX weapon is an AoE Brave plus HP attack. He gets a unique buff that he does an HP attack every time he does a follow-up attack. But the problem with this is his attack power is kind of low, so he may not benefit too much from the ability. For his EX Plus, I would recommend maxing him out because he needs all the damage that he can do because his whole kit revolves around Brave Shaving and doing damage. Because of this, he doesn't really have a good minimal use, but if you wanted to do minimal investment, 2 out of 3 is good for him because he gets the buffs starting up right away. Next unit we have is Tifa. Tifa is a melee DPS unit. She can launch enemies. Her EX weapon, I would definitely recommend maxing her out to do the most damage possible. Because of this, she does not get any minimal ingot recommendations. If you're going to use Tifa, definitely invest the ingots or leave her on the bench. Next up we got Kimahri. Kimahri is a new unit. His role is a debuffer. He's a ranged hybrid unit that can blind enemies. He does healing. He can reduce party HP damage taken, so it's pretty unique there. The EX Plus weapon, notable thing is it can blind enemies 100%, and you get this from the base, so that's pretty nice. When you upgrade it, I would definitely recommend maxing him out again, because he needs to do the most damage that he can. He gets more brave hits, he does more overflow. But if you want to go the minimum route, I would go with 2 out of 3 because the EX gauge starts off max, so it's nice for him to have for longevity. For Yuna, her role is the magic hybrid unit. She can clear debuffs, she can heal your party, she can battery, and she can extend buffs by 1 turn, so that's pretty unique. For Yuna's EX Plus, definitely recommend maxing her out. The reason for this is she gets the Val 4 buff right away at the start of the quest, so you don't have to wait for your gauge to charge up right away. And because of this, you can see there's no minimum ingot recommendation here. Next up we have Rosa. Rosa comes back with the rework. She's a magic support unit. She gives your team big auras. She gives brave regen and healing now with her rework. For EX Plus, I actually recommend maxing her out because the last upgrade you get splash damage. But if you're going the minimum route, 2 out of 3 should be sufficient because she gets a large stat boost there. Her EX ability is kind of slow, so you're not going to be using it too much throughout the fight anyway. Next up we got Sabin. Sabin is a Wind Holy Imperator. He's an elemental magical DPS unit. His new EX weapon is a single target HP attack executed 2 times. He does Imperil after the first hit, so he'll be doing some good damage, and it also ignores defense. Thing with his EX Plus, I would recommend maxing him out for sure, because his role is a damage dealer, so he needs to do as much damage as you can, and he gets an extra instance of HP attacks. So there's no minimal recommendation here. Next unit I have is the Emperor, a very hyped unit coming up. His role is a debuffer, he also does AoE magical DPS. His new EX weapon, basically it inflicts traps on all enemies and it triggers all traps that are existing already. So for his EX Plus, definitely recommend maxing him out again. He's a primarily damage dealer, so he needs to do as much damage as possible. So for this, again, no minimal ingot recommendation. And you get a nice sphere if you max him out. You can stick this on any DPS unit that raises attack by 10% after you inflict the debuff, so that's pretty nice. Next unit we have is Furion. So Furion is a melee DPS unit. He has Eye Brave and End Brave aura. His EX Plus weapon recommendation is going to be 3 out of 3 because he gets a improved HP plus attack. And you get a nice sphere along with this. Because of this reason, he does not get a minimum recommendation. Next unit we have is Setzer. Now Setzer is a ranged utility unit. He can bury your party, he can delay, he can freeze enemies, and he also packs a good aura. For his EX Plus, definitely recommend maxing him out, and the reason is pretty clear here. He gets a increased recast speed of the ability, so that helps out his longevity a lot. Moving on to Vanille. Vanille comes back with a rework. She's a magical dispeller unit. She can debuff enemies and she can battery. She now has a potent attack and max brave aura. With her EX Plus, I actually recommend taking her all the way to 3 out of 3 because she gets a more dispelling options with the assassination, so it's very unique for her role. And you also get this nice sphere where you can have a unit dispel that couldn't dispel before. If you want to go to minimum route, you can go 1 out of 3 here because this is where her HP Plus changes. And for this, you will have to sacrifice her dispelling options. Next unit we have is Sarah. So Sarah is a magical debuffer. She can battery the party with attack and max brave aura. For EX Plus, I actually recommend 3 out of 3 because she gets a new and improved HP Plus attack, so that helps out her longevity a lot. You get this nice sphere along the way. You get, after inflicting a debuff, you can raise her max bravery, so it's pretty good on her. Next up we have Yuffie. Yuffie is a ranged debuffer. She can gravity and she can battery the party. She has an attack and max brave aura for your team as well. Her new EX weapon is an AoE brave plus HP attack. It does splash damage. She gets an aura that improves party attack and max bravery. And the new debuff she inflicts prevents boss from gaining buffs. He also cannot do battery gain. For her EX Plus, I recommend taking her to max because her HP Plus attack is improved. Her splash attack is improved to 100% as well, so that's pretty good. Because of that, there's no minimum recommendation. You do get a nice sphere. After you reflect a debuff, you get increased stats for 3 turns, so it's pretty nice on her or other attack units. And the last unit we have is Bartz. Bartz is a melee gravity unit. He has a battery. He improves all stats for your team. For him, I recommend doing 3 ingots because he gets the HP plus attack upgrade. But if you were to use minimal, 2 out of 3 should be sufficient because that's where he gets the unique buff going. And his EX cast is really fast where you may not need to use the HP plus attack at all. You do get a nice sphere if you choose to max him out. Every time you break a target, your max brave is increased by 20% for 3 turns, which is pretty significant. So here we are, we have the role breakdown, something different than priority. I am going to highlight a couple units that I think are high priority. So starting off, we have Aura and Buffs area. So these units, in my opinion, have the strongest auras or buffs in the game coming out. And the highest priority would go to Rosa, in my opinion. I would not actually recommend Barret because Barret's kit doesn't really do enough damage because his attack stat is kind of low and his artifacts have to focus on the Crystal 50. So he does not batter your team either. So I would not recommend Barret unless you really wanted to use him. Next category we have is Gravity units. Now Yuffie and Bartz are going to belong here. Of the 2 of them, I actually recommend Yuffie over Bartz because she has more utility than him. She can debuff enemies, she can prevent bosses from getting buffs, and dispel for your team. And she can batter your team pretty good. Next up we have Hybrid and Utility. So here we have Kimahri, Yuna, and Setzer. These units can do a bunch of things, they're pretty versatile. However, I would not actually recommend Kimahri because he doesn't excel in any field, and his HP damage reduction could be better taken by Bosch, for example. Setzer will probably be the best choice in this group. Next up, we have Dispel. So for Dispelling, you have Vanille and we have Balthier. Of the 2 of them, I would actually recommend Vanille because she has auras, whereas Balthier does not. And the last category would be Damage Dealers. The damage dealers we have would be Emperor, Tifa, Furion, and Sabin. Out of this group, Emperor would be the one that shines. Tifa would not be a bad second choice. She is primarily melee focused if you need a melee damage dealer. So I would not recommend Furion because he does not have an attack aura, so his damage is going to be rather lackluster compared to other damage dealers. I would not recommend Sabin in that vein as well because he's a selfish damage dealer and he also has elements in his kit which can be shut down. There are other DPS units that you can use in place of him. Now just to leave you guys with some parting advice, make sure to think carefully about spending your ingots. Very few exceptions, but most units you have to max if you plan to use them. Remember that effective ingot use is greater than minimal ingot use. You don't want to be stuck in a situation where you have a team that's not built to tackle content. Make sure to evaluate your roster. Look for roles that you need covered. For example, do you need a Dispeller? Because Cloud doesn't really count as a Dispeller. Do you need a tank? Because Wool doesn't really count as a tank. We have good tanks like Bosch coming out, Celeste is coming out, and Zac is coming out pretty soon. Warrior of Light is more of a support unit, can be bypassed by bosses. Make sure to prepare a diverse roster. We know that Dimensions N is coming with the Chaos levels, so this means that the Emperor will not save you, but this shouldn't stop you from pulling for the Emperor. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.